Hello, and welcome to this series of podcasts on Gordie Gillespie, who many of us believe was the greatest coach of all time. I hope that these conversations with players and friends of Gordie will help illuminate Gordie's greatness. But more importantly, I hope we can learn how Gordie did it. He was the winningest collegiate baseball coach of all time and the greatest Illinois high school football coach of all time. But we're not interested in his secrets of winning games, but his secrets of winning the hearts, minds, and the development of his young athletes. Matt Denure played baseball for Gordie in his first few years at Ripon University. Matt was a walk-on in his first year, and under Gordie's tutelage, Matt improved fast enough to be drafted by the Philadelphia Phillies after his senior year. Matt has been a teacher and a coach at Portage High School in Wisconsin for 23 years, where he tries to pass on to his students what Gordie taught him. Hello, and welcome again to our Conversations on Gordie. Today it's my pleasure to interview Matt Denure. Matt played for Gordie when Gordie had, quote, retired. What does the winningest baseball coach of all time do when he retires? He moved up to Ripon, Wisconsin, and coached baseball with his son, Bob. Bob was the baseball and basketball coach, taking after his dad, of course. So he coached three sports. And Bob thought, how cool would it be for me to be Dad's assistant in baseball and then have Dad be my assistant in basketball. So he moved up to Ripon, Wisconsin, and Matt was a sophomore when Gordie came. So Matt got to play with Gordie for 3 years, had some great teams up there at Ripon. Then afterwards, Matt was signed by the Phillies. Then he became a teacher at Portage High School. Matt just told me he's been teaching there for 22 years. And he started coaching baseball and softball, golf. So once again, he's taken after Gordie, being a coach of multiple sports. So welcome, Matt. And why don't we start by telling us, where did you first meet Gordie?
Ray, great to be here. Can't wait to talk about Gordie and share some stories. Really cool thing where we ended up living, a very tiny town in Wisconsin called Partyville. It's very small, but after my freshman year, that's when I first met Gordie. I had started for Bob at shortstop, and Gordie's a pretty thorough guy, of course, so he wanted to make sure he could come and just see who he had. So they came all the way to this tiny little town we had a summer league team called the Partyville Braves, and there's a lot of college guys there and a few guys who had been signed that would come back and play. And so we had a pretty good team. Anyways, but I was so nervous because Gordie Gillespie, and I didn't really know of him as much as probably people from Illinois did. I heard of him through Bob, and we had watched his tapes and read his books and things like that. So I just knew of him. But both Gordie and Joan came down, shook my hand before the game. I had never met somebody that just seemed like a grandfather, as everybody would say. It was amazing. So I at once felt very comfortable around him, and also paralyzed with fear that I wanted to go 5 for 4 that game and impress this guy. Which, anyways, so that's when I first met him. Was actually about a mile or 2 miles from where I'm sitting right now. So it's pretty cool.
So did you know much about his past, that he had won 3 straight national titles in the 70s? So how were you impressed that way, or did he come as sort of a blank page for you?
Well, obviously I'd known Bob. My uncle had gone to Ripon and played baseball for Bob as well. So I knew the name Gillespie, and my uncle was a pitcher, and he had developed like a callus or something on his hand. He had these little weird injuries, and Bob would always just call Gordie, and then I think the recipe was to soak your hand in pickle juice or some story like that. There was some awesome old school remedy. And so I'd heard of Gordie like in the 80s, just the name Gordie, and it just stuck with me. I didn't really have an appreciation for the history until I got there and saw the books that Bob had and the videos and those types of things. And Bob would talk about his dad a lot. So I didn't know about the national titles, to be honest with you. I didn't know of the 50 or 60 odd players that he had signed. I did not know. And I love baseball, and I had Some of my favorite players are the Milwaukee Braves because my grandparents and my dad would talk about those guys, and lo and behold, and I do have over my shoulder a picture of autograph of Earl Gillespie, who I met. And so once I got to meet Gordie, we talked some Brave stuff about Warren Spahn and Earl and all that kind of stuff. So it was neat. But I got to be honest, I didn't really know that much of a legend that he was. I mean, he was an awesome guy, but I didn't have any idea of his wins, losses, championships. He just treated me like a king from day one.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. So you played 1 year with the Phillies, and what made you decide to go into teaching?
Uh, Gordie, um,
Yeah.
as everybody I think would probably say that and like everybody, I really mean that. Outside of my parents and grandparents, Gordie's the most, my family. Gordie's the most important person. I mean, it just is as simple as that. And um, in reading about him and how he wanted to emulate and pass on the lessons of his high school coach and his coaches at Illinois and DePaul and so on. That was honestly, I didn't go into college thinking I want to be a teacher. I want to do this. I went because I liked school. I liked baseball, and I was going to, study and do those types of things, I guess, and do what you're supposed to do. And then once I saw him though, and how he made you feel, and by the way, you got better and our teams got better. So it was just, he really taught me that one person could make a big difference, like really could. And not that my family didn't do that, but he was just so grand and how he made you feel. You just felt better every time you talk with him. You just felt better about yourself. And I thought, if I could do that for, I don't know, somebody, one person, then that would be worth it. So I guess that's honestly why and think of my first job interview, that's what I said is, and they had no idea necessarily in Wisconsin, the legendary Gordie Gillespie, but I said I had a college baseball coach, Gordie Gillespie, and I say his name as often as I can so that people hear it and they hopefully get curious and look him up or whatever. And so that's, I guess, right to the point, Gordie Gillespie, and I just want to somehow repay what he has given me, which is just awesome.
Well, we're very similar in that way because when I went to Lewis, Gordie had just started the baseball program, and he was playing what we would call a club sport back then. He wasn't getting paid to be the baseball coach. He went to the president and said we should start a minor sport. He was the basketball coach and athletic director, and the president said, "Fine, we should start minor sports to get more students." Because I think Lewis only had maybe 150 students at the time, and he was worried about losing his job. We suggested they start minor sports, give the athletes a small stipend, and collect most of the tuition. And the president said, "Great idea. You'll be the baseball coach, but we have no money to pay you." So he was playing maybe 15 games a year, and then almost by accident in that '62 season, he put together this great team, which is chapter 1 in the book. And so we didn't know that he was a legend because he wasn't a legend. That was his first season, and we finished third in the country. And after that, he didn't have to recruit. High school coaches were calling him all the time and begging him to take their star player. So it was very much the same way. But like you, man, I was a young kid, of course, like you, but I sensed greatness in this man. I couldn't get enough of him. I'd go into his office and we would talk. I remember once I became the hero of the basketball team because I had just picked up a book. My roommate gave it to me. It was called Catch-22, and it's a tremendous book. So right before practice, about 10 minutes to 3, I walked in and I said, "Coach, I've got this great book I'm reading. It's called Catch-22." Well, Paul Ruddy was the assistant coach, and he happened to be in the office. And we sat in there for a good 20, 25 minutes, just recounting the incredible stories in the book. So I got all my teammates 20 minutes less of workout. Believe me, his basketball workouts were tough. So yeah, well, we didn't know anything about him, but we knew. Can you remember anything about your seasons with him that stands out? When did you get this idea that you were in the presence of greatness?
There, as people who played for him, there was a great sense. You just got more confident, and when he said things like things you were going to accomplish, you just believed him. you were there too, and you know that, but um, he talked about flying a national championship flag because when he first came there, just by chance, I believe it was by chance because his retirement was, kind of a surprise ending. He's like, I don't like Arizona, and he's like, I'm done, and I'm gonna go back and retire by, coaching and doing all that kind of stuff in frigid. Well, I suppose he's used to Joliet, so he probably Wisconsin wasn't gonna hurt his feelings too much, but. He talked about hanging a national championship flag at this brand new field, and I thought when I graduated with 29 or 30 people, the idea of playing on a team, and then I knew being at Ripon, I knew he was a national champion 4 times and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, he's not kidding. And you start to believe then, I guess even more. So I guess and as hard as you alluded to his basketball practices, I never played college basketball, but I can tell you that compared to just high school basketball, his baseball practices when he wanted to do bunt coverages or he wanted to do something 100 times in a row to make sure you got it and you could be pulled out of bed in the middle of the night and you could know this coverage. You just did it that many times, and I know that when he designed something and he wanted you to actually be able to incorporate it, I mean, you work so hard. And I know that was talked about. He talked about teaching lessons all the time, and when you were prepared, you felt confident, and that was great too. So I mean, I just felt better, physically, mentally. I mean, of course he treated like a king every time you saw him. So I think it didn't take me long to really, I don't know. It didn't take me long to realize he was special. Now he could have had 0 wins, and I think I would have felt the same way because he just treated me that well. So I think early on, once I got the privilege of playing and practicing with him, I knew it was different, and I really enjoyed it.
So you said that when you did not have a scholarship to Ripon, that you were a walk-on in your freshman year. Is that right?
Yeah, it's NCAA school, and it's just Division III, so they were just academic scholarships. And so I played. My uncle had gone there, and I liked the campus, and I'd gone on tour. And I'm a history major and education minor, and I loved history. And the professor that I went and met on the very first visit, tremendous guy, ended up being my advisor. So I loved the history of it and the campus and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I had to fight. I had to fight to get, and even at a small Division III school in Wisconsin, I can count on no hands how many letters I got from anybody who wanted me to play baseball for them. But I just wanted to go there, and then I just think it's just a blessing, I guess, that Gordie fell, into my lap, so to speak, my sophomore year. I can't believe that I, again, didn't have a lot of options. I wasn't being recruited by University of Illinois or DePaul or anybody like that, or Notre Dame never called either. But I really, man, I just feel blessed that I was able to just already be there. So Gordie was there. So no, I was not recruited. Had to fight for a spot, and the first year I played shortstop. Then Gordie came. Then he guess what? Gordie can still recruit. So then all the state champions from around the state. They started coming to Ripon. And so then we had another excellent shortstop that came in. So I moved to third base, and I played there for a season, had to fight for that spot. And then guess what? He recruited another all-state player who comes in. Again, no scholarships, just Division III. I'm sure this kid could have played anywhere too. Awesome player, awesome hitter. And so then I went to the outfield. So then the first 3 years, I played 3 different positions. So Gordie was all about, like Paul's book, The Team, was all about the team. How can we make the team better? And I'd like to say I got that right. It's not always easy to fight and claw for a spot for 3 straight years, but it certainly made me a better player. I learned a lot, and I'd like to think I was a good teammate.
Well, it's very interesting as I hear you speaking, Matt, because you are the personification of what Gordie called Coach the kid at the end of the bench. So you started as just a walk-on, and you weren't a recruited player. And he showed an interest in you, and he showed an interest in almost everybody. In both sports that I played, baseball and basketball, he took me aside and gave me something special. In basketball, believe it or not, he taught me the jump hook, and it was in fact, I called your old coach, Bob Gillespie, 2 weeks ago, and I was going to tell him about the book and the website, and I got his number from Joan, and I didn't know that he'd remember me. I'd only really met Bob since he was a kid. Of course, as a kid, he would come to our practices and things like that. But as an adult, I think I only met him once when he had a celebratory dinner and an open mic up in Ripon. And I called him up. I said, Bob Gillespie? He says, yes. I said, this is a voice from your past. And again, I had no idea what his reaction was going to be. I said, this is Ray Conklin. And he goes, Ray, how's your jump hook? Well, Gordie called me aside in my freshman year, and I was the kid at the end of the bench, and he taught me this jump hook. I thought it was the dumbest thing in the world. And it wasn't until my junior year when he looks at me, and I'm 6'3", so I'm a small forward. And he says, do you know the center spot? And I said, yeah, because my brother, like 10 years older than me, and told me all the time, listen to everything your coach is saying. So I knew everything. And I said, yeah. And he thinks, now this is about a week before the season starts, Matt. And he looks at me, because we had Harry Mosier, who was a great, great athlete, strong as a horse, 6'8", leaped through the sky, but he couldn't shoot. And one thing I could do, I couldn't leap through the sky and catcher's legs, but I could shoot. And he says, Ray, you become the center. And I was able to shoot my jump hook. So it paid off. So in the same way, obviously what he was doing with you, moving you from shortstop to third and then to outfield, paid off. You had to become one great ball player if you were signed by the Phillies.
My most proud moment though is I have a baseball behind me, and I asked Gordie, like you, I went to his office. I wish I would have went more. I wish I would have, and he didn't have any. He had one. I think he had like one trophy in there. That was it. But otherwise, you wouldn't know if he was a tennis coach or a Hall of Fame baseball coach or the swimming coach. He was just, he was just treat you the same. And there's nothing in his office really that would really designate him as a Hall of Famer. But when it comes to, I'd like to visit with him, and I like to go up there. And I'm most proud of, yes, the being drafted, especially from a town of my size. But the baseball behind me says he called me Frenchie. There was apparently a player in the 40s, a nickname Frenchie Bordigaray. And I don't know why, if he thought my name, Denure, was French. I don't know, but man, I don't think he ever called me Matt. I think it was always Frenchie. And of course, my teammates they just love that. They just love that. Then it became a whole bunch of variations. But there were so many funny stories with that. People didn't know my name because Gordie never used my name. He just always called me Frenchie. But the ball behind me that says, to a great captain, it says, Frenchie, to a great captain, your coach, Gordie Gillespie. And I'm trying not to choke up right now.
Yeah.
But man, that's my my pride and joy, I guess. And it's in a UV case, and it's something I really treasure. So I just wanted to do right by Gordie, and I thought if I could do right by him, that's really all that mattered. And even some 20 plus years later, I still feel the same way, that I'm glad he felt I was a good ball player, and I was a good teammate, and I was a great captain. And I just can't think of a higher honor than to have Gordie, say those things about me.
That's beautiful. I remember Dave Laquetta, the athletic director at St. Francis, saying that so many of us have letters from Gordie, and we cherish them. And I pointed over to my other bookshelf over here. I said, "Oh, I've got a whole stack of them." And I pull one out every once in a while and just read. And he was an inveterate letter writer, and he coached. Pat Sullivan and I did some simple math. He coached somewhere between 2,400. I played it low on the website, put 2,400, but we think it's closer to 3,000, especially when you factor in the JV teams that he had.
Oh, yeah.
Those guys looked up to him. But you mentioned a couple of things, Matt, that are very interesting. And one, you talked about repetition at practice. And when you read the 10 Commandments of Gordie, he constantly talks about repetition, and he talks about enthusiasm. And he says that your players are not going to want to do this repetition, but you, coach, know that you've got to do this in order to be another 10 Commandment, be prepared. And you have to make sure that it's fun while they're doing that. And so listening to you, so you were the shortstop in your freshman year, sophomore year. Then has a freshman coming in to play shortstop. So he's got a choice. What can I do? He had faith in you because he knew you. But he doesn't have that faith in the new freshman shortstop because he doesn't know him yet. So he has faith that you'll move to third and learn it because he saw you working your tail off. I tell everyone that when I got to Lewis, I thought that I was a good practice player. It never occurred to me that I wasn't until I saw Eddie Spezio. And Eddie Spezio, every single moment of every single practice, he was a baseball player. And he was the quietest guy on the team, but he was the absolute team leader because we just watched him. And every drill, he went 100%. He never left practice without sweating. And I didn't learn till years later. He would end his first class at 1 o'clock, and then he'd drive home. He lived there in Joliet because he and his brother would, for an hour, go into their basement and hit rolled up socks. So he had already practiced hitting for an hour before he came to Lewis practice. But in the same way, Gordie trusted that you could. Gordie saying to himself, "I can move Matt to third base because he's going to learn it. He's going to be in the same way that then your senior, he moves you out there." And I'm sure he went and told the scouts the same thing. When they come in, they said, "Well, how about Denure?" And he says, "Are you kidding? That kid Denure, he's going to learn anything you teach him." And I can almost hear him saying things like that. So I would imagine when you became coach, maybe you tried to emulate him.
I tried. Often imitated, seldom never duplicated with Gordie, of course, but I tried. You're right with repetitions, and his enthusiasm, and obviously never got to play with Mr. Spezio like you did. But that's how Gordie was at practice. I third base doing bunt coverages, and I just remember, and I was you're in pretty good shape when you're 20 years old or whatever, thinking, again, I'm a pretty good practice player, but we're going to do this 500 times or whatever it was because we have to make sure, and then backpedal back there in case this, in case that. But when it happened in the game, you all of a sudden you'd make plays, and you just kind of wake up. You're like, what just happened? Did I just field that on a body control play, throw across my body, and then make the play, and then somehow backpedal back to third in case the runner from first was coming over, and you realize, oh, that's why we did that 500 times. And so then you start to, not that we didn't believe in Gordie before, but when you make a play like that you realize, wow, that's really good. That's really impressive. It helped the team, and it was just physically demanding. And then it just makes it easier. I'd like to think I was a good practice player. I know Gordie was a great practice coach because whether it's BP with wiffle balls, pickleballs, whatever we had, and we didn't. Now that at Ripon College, they've got a beautiful new facility, but we had, I think we had practice from 8 to 11 p.m. because that's when the indoor tennis courts were available. It wasn't quite the Armory, but it was a similar feel. It was a synthetic floor, and we built some indoor batting cage, and we're hitting these like limited compression balls. They weighed the same, but they'd be hitting off lights and off of things, and we're just scrimmaging in there. And of course, he'd be the umpire, and we did that all the time, and we hit wiffle balls all the time. And man, in 3 hours, you came, if you did it right, like you said, if you were a good practice player and you followed what Gordie did, you knew you were a better ball player when you walked out if you did those things. So that was really great. Now I tried to do that when I was coaching. Pretty much tried to do a carbon copy. I've got all my books here too, and I've got some of his practice plans, like by the month, and his beautiful penmanship that he would give us captains. Could he give us copies? Trusting his players, empowering his players, all those things. Just, whether it be take the pitching machine down to the hardware store and get the tires balanced and properly inflated, things like that, or paint the batting helmets, or do this or do that. He gave us like real responsibility, real jobs, and so I'd like to think I did a little bit of that with the players that I was fortunate enough to coach. But the repetition, that's one thing. But you're right, though. You've got to be energetic, or the kids are going to see through it. They don't want to just do it to do it. They might be respectful. They might be compliant. But Gordie was inspiring on that 495th, bunt coverage. Somehow he made it feel like it was the World Series to me, and it kept me more, I guess, present in the whole motion and the whole moment. It was really good. So I hope I did that a little bit. I coached some good players when I played some college baseball, and they're really fine players now, coaches themselves. But I don't know if I could ever do justice to how Gordie ran the show.
Yeah, we all have to admit that we're not going to be as good as Gordie, but we can still try. I really laughed when you said you had your indoor batting facility, because we were coming back from Quincy freshman year, and Tony Delgado and I would sit with the coach, and we'd want to ride with him wherever we went. And we're coming back, and it's probably around midnight in March. And Tony said, Coach, can we have some time off before we start baseball? And he says, yeah, you have till tomorrow afternoon. He says, the rest of the guys have been practicing indoors for 3 weeks, and you have a lot to make up. So we go in the next day, we put our baseball garb on, not basketball, and he's got 2 indoor hitting. It was this tiny little room. It was a basketball court, a small basketball court, not regulation, and the walls were the out of bounds. So how in the world, where he got this, I can't remember. But he had 2 batting cages set up, and the pitchers were pitching past the block there, and kind of like rubber balls, very similar to you described. And there's nothing more boring in the world, nothing, than catching batting practice. And especially since you don't know anybody. Now, a couple of basketball players were also playing baseball, so I knew them, but I didn't know any of these other guys. So then I have to put my gear on, and I go to catch. And the pitchers would throw, and they would hit, let's say, 7 balls. And you would hear the ball hit the bat and then hit the wall. So you'd hear boom, 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 boom. This is what you talk about incessant. And they're just kind of lobbing the ball in. So, there was nothing to catch because everybody hit the ball. Only if it was a wild pitch, then I'd have to go chase it. So I'm having a lousy time. And maybe the 7th batter comes in. And that first swing went by my head so fast, it shook me to the bone. Like that. And instead of hearing boom, boom, I heard boom, 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 boom. And everybody stopped. And I looked up, I said, oh, that's Spezio. Okay. That's who everybody's been talking about. So when you said that about the indoor hitting, and Ripon's a lot colder than Chicago. So you probably had to stay outside, inside. You couldn't go outside for even longer than we had. But then you went down south. Did you go down south?
Very similar to all the other teams as well. I mean, we'd be inside the whole time. And then the first time we were outside literally would be in Florida. We'd go to Florida. That would be the very first time. And, every pitch, the first at bat of the season, it seems like the ball's going 107 miles an hour because you're just not used to it. Now, Gordie did put us in that, it was the 2 tennis courts. It was about perfect for an infield. That was about it. If you played regular depth, you could basically get an infield in there. But it wasn't lit very well. And so the balls in there our pitchers all seemed like Cy Young because we couldn't, it seemed like 95 miles an hour. So, but still, once we got down south, same deal. It was always, in Gordie, there was no cream puffs on that schedule. We're playing, my senior year, I remember we played the number 1 ranked team in the country, in our first game, and we were supposed to be pretty good in our conference. And I think we might have been, we lost 18-5 or 18-3, and we had pretty good pitching. But that was our first game. But again, that was Gordie. Like, hey, doesn't matter if you guys haven't seen a pitch or fielded a ball off grass or anything. One year, in fact, I remember it was kind of cold down in Florida, not quite a snowstorm, as I've heard a story from Tony like that in your book. But it was a cold and kind of dreary. But we didn't. The game got rained out, but we took batting practice in the parking lot. We got our gym shoes on, we had wiffle balls, milk crates, and we took batting practice in the parking lot because why wouldn't you? I mean, we can still practice, we can still get better. So that was something. So yes, we did go to Florida, but it seemed like, I think one year we were maybe 500, and that felt like a really good trip if we were 500 because a lot of those teams obviously had been playing a bit more than us, but it was still a good experience, of course.
Yeah. So it's interesting you said it because we started playing it. I didn't realize it. In fact, I said to Gordie when I was writing the book, I said, Gordie, I thought when I joined Lewis that I was joining a well-oiled machine. I didn't realize that not only wasn't it not well-oiled, it wasn't even a machine. It was an accident that you put these players together, but you had Spezio, and that made all the difference. But I can picture him because he was playing 15 games a year before our season. We ended up, I think, playing close to 30, 35. And so he was probably on the phone all day when he realized what he had. And we just had such a phenomenal team. we outclassed so many of these teams we played. Let me explain to you what I meant by that. Spezia was up once with the bases loaded and 1 out, and they intentionally walked him. Now, have you ever heard of somebody being intentionally walked with the bases loaded? And he was so mad, he took the bat, and we were using aluminum bats, we were using wood bats. He took the bat and hit the plate with it in frustration and broke the darn bat in two. That's how strong he was. But he had hit a 3-run homer and a 2-run homer, which I think are still rolling somewhere. His previous 2 at bats. And the coach didn't want him to hit a 3rd home run. He said, it'll be better if
we'll give you one. We'll just give you 1 run.
So then he goes up to Ripon. And so you read in the book how he went from Lewis to St. Francis, which is really, really fascinating. And when I did the research on that, because I was in Philadelphia at the time, and here I heard that my beloved coach, after he wins 3 straight national titles, is leaving Lewis to go to St. Francis. What in the world can that be all about? So I couldn't let my reader of the book say, well, wait a minute, Ray, why is he at St. Francis? He just won 3 straight national titles. You have to tell me why he went. And my readers now will know, but until the book came out, I was literally the only person who knew why he left. And it's really an amazing story. But then the reason why he went up to Ripon, one of the reasons was that he felt that Tony Delgado, his longtime assistant, deserved to be head coach. And then there was something about Arizona also. And so that's when Bob said, why don't you come up to Ripon? And look how lucky you were to meet not only the senior Gillespie, but you also were able to play for the junior Gillespie. I mean, Bob retired. I mean, his record up in Ripon is just absolutely amazing in both sports.
Oh yeah, Bob in basketball is they have the court name is named after him, and obviously it's a smaller college, but they were a perennial. I mean, for the 25 years that I've been following, I mean, they were always right there and getting in the NCAAs and great players and getting good in-state players and just really just high quality. And now, I mean, Bob's a good coach in his own right, of course. But it was awesome to have Bob as I didn't play basketball, but have Bob as a baseball coach my freshman year, and then to see Gordie from my sophomore through my senior. It was really awesome. Just obviously different strengths, but Gordie, maybe Bob was like that with basketball, and I've never played football either, so I couldn't even comment on Gordie's football side of things. But the preparation for baseball, it was just tough to comprehend. He was a genius, as I know you said before. He's a genius. And his preparation allowed him to anticipate certain things and prepare us for certain things that might only happen once in a season, but by golly, we're ready for it when it happened. Whatever it might have been. And so I do feel incredibly lucky that I was able to just meet him, let alone play for him. And Joan and Gordie were like family. They would have me over for soup and a sandwich if I was having a rough time to their house. And they would call, and he'd always ask about my grandparents. And he just was, it was quite simply amazing. And so, yeah, however the long and winding road that got him to Ripon College in Wisconsin, I am thankful, and I'm hoping that there's some players that I've coached, they got a little bit of the Gordie Gillespie, and I always credited him. And you know what? Sometimes when they're wearing the hitting vests that I bought, maybe many players wear too, maybe they were like, I know this Gillespie guy, I don't know if we like this or whatever, but we did the repetitions, and I try to give them the feedback as Gordie would as to why you're doing it and what's the point and all that kind of stuff too. So I hope that it keeps going, and Gordie, I know, credited many of his fine coaches, and I thought, how could anybody be better than Gordie? If he's trying to emulate somebody else, that's also just quite powerful. So hopefully that if I can keep that chain going a little bit, that'd be outstanding.
I think if we can just get across the 10 commandments, they're absolutely brilliant. And I was talking to Mike Spinoza, who played for Gordie at St. Francis, and he became president of Sally Beauty, a worldwide beauty store chain, over 5,000 stores. And he said, Ray, when I read the 10 commandments that you talk about with Gordie's mantras, he says, we use that in business all the time. And that's what a good CEO and the president should be doing. So I'm wondering that you become a teacher. And when Gordie first told me about his Ten Commandments, now I had heard him speak a number of times, and he would take snippets of that talk and use it in the talks that I heard. But I had never heard all 10 at once in this talk that he gave at the ABCA, American Baseball Coaches Association. There were 6,000 coaches, and he expected them to get up and walk out because he thought that they were going, it was a 45-minute talk, the central talk, because he won the Lefty Gomez Award. And he was so worried that he wanted to talk about this philosophy of coaching, but he thought that they were waiting to hear how to throw a better knuckle curveball or field the double play a little bit better. And if he started talking too abstract with them, they'd get up and walk out. And for the one and only time at the ABCA, he got a standing ovation. But I think that I know that once I started talking to him about the Ten Commandments, and I said, well, what do you mean by this? What example can you use here? And we started fleshing it out, et cetera, because he didn't remember exactly. And I kept hounding the ABCA to see if they had it on tape or something, and I couldn't find it. I still think they have it somewhere buried. I can't imagine that someone given such a great talk and they hadn't recorded it. I'm still going to try and find someone who might look in an archive somewhere. And I'm thinking of the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark, when they're looking for the Ark in that last scene. It's somewhere in this, this distant looking warehouse. So it's somewhere in the ABCA warehouse. But in any case, I think if we can capture those 10 commandments and give them to people all over the place. I know myself now. I thought I was a pretty good teacher until we started talking about these 10 commandments. Enthusiasm. I know there's some days when I'd walk into the classroom and I would feel, he says, you can't do that as a coach. You only have a couple hours. Get enthusiastic. Get rolling. And it changed my teaching. I remember every single class, I think, since he and I talked about it, I walk into that classroom and I am energized. I don't care what has happened before. For this hour and a half, I'm going to be energized. So did you see yourself bringing any of those 10 commandments to your own coaching?
Yes, but I think it took some time. Just started coaching right away out of college, and I felt confident in the X's and O's because I was pretty fresh off of playing for Gordie, and he's the best there is. So I felt pretty good about that. I think, man, I think yes, a little bit. I think that I did a pretty good job with the enthusiasm. When you mentioned on the sports field or the practice field, I think it took me as a teacher, it took me a couple years to really feel that I was in command of what I was teaching and those types of things. And I had good activities and lessons and all that kind of stuff. But you mentioned enthusiasm. Gordie was able to give you something with that. Like, it made you feel better. The energy was raised. And so I try as best that I can to be mindful of that as well, because the kids deserve it, quite frankly. And if you're coaching, if there's a 6 a.m. workout or something, well, if you're not enthusiastic about being there, then they sure as heck aren't going to be either. And so I know whether it's Gordie was the king of the nicknames or the funny slogans or something. There was just I don't know. I actually have a little after Gordie passed, I just was pretty emotional, and I started writing this little notebook of just different things that he had said, and so his humor, his enthusiasm, and again, he was a genius. But there were other times where he was a genius because he was able to either break the tension or comfort you when something went terribly wrong, where you thought the earth was going to explode, and really it was just that you just struck out on a high fastball with the bases loaded when all we needed was you to walk or whatever. And his enthusiasm, and again, the quote I wanted to say was that I know is in here. I'll trade you for a dog and shoot the dog. I don't know if that was a Lewis thing or if that was a St. Francis thing, but and he would never belittle anybody. But if you would throw to the wrong base in practice, or even if you would make he'd either blow his whistle or he'd walk in the middle field and then he'd wave his arms and, oh Lord, you can take me now. He'd always say stuff like that, be super dramatic. And then that was awesome. And he'd do some Donald Duck noises here and there once in a while. And that was pretty funny. But I loved it when he said, He trade you for a dog and then shoot the dog, or he traded you a conference rival. That was another thing. I'm
Yeah.
going to trade you to such and such for a broken fungo bat, or I'm going to trade you to such and such for a bag of practice balls. That's about all I can get, stuff like that. But it was always done in good humor, and the kids were laughing, and it was never like, hey, I just struck out. That's also why the your work is amazing, because that's one of the when I met him for the first time, that was outstanding. That was really cool. But um, as I mentioned before, and as anybody who's ever played for Gordie, when you go down south, you play these great teams, bigger schools, southern schools. I think it was my sophomore year. All I know is we had a really tremendous pitcher we were playing the College of Charleston, which I think is a Division I school, and we're a Division III school. And this tremendous pitcher of ours is throwing. I mean, it's a 2-1 game, or a 2-0 game, or a 1-0 game, very very tight. And anyways, I was playing third, and I had made a throwing error, and the throwing error gets a guy on, and of course that guy's going to score. That's just how it works. All right. Well, then in the bottom of the inning, I think we're the home team. The bottom of the inning, I have a chance to redeem myself. There's bases loaded. There's only one out, as I hinted at before, swinging at a bad pitch. It was 3-2. And lo and behold, there's a pitch about eye level. If I just don't swing, we win the game, because it's tied because of my throwing error. If I just don't swing, we win the game. If I just do nothing, we win. Instead, I swung at a pitch at my eyes. I wanted to be a hero. I thought this would be a great story. Made an error, but I redeemed myself. And my friend was pitching. He was throwing a great game. No, I struck out. And I was the first time I was nervous. That I still think the walk back to the dugout from home plate, I was on the first base side, and Gordie was sitting on a bucket, upside down pail, holding the fungo bat. And I thought, I'm not sure what he's going to say. If I was a coach, I'd probably lose it on this kid who just cost us the game, basically, on defense and now on offense too. By the way, we ended up winning the game, but at that point, it's still in the balance. And I was waiting for him to snap, for him to do something, for him to embarrass me, because I deserved it, I thought. And I got closer to him. I kept getting closer, and no, his hands are not any higher in the bat or anything, and he's not standing up. So I'm like, what's going to happen here? And all I did was, he's like, Frenchie, that was a hell of a swing, he said. And he patted me on the backside as I walked by. That was it. And I got goosebumps telling a story, because that's when I'm like, I'll run through a wall for this guy, because it wasn't when you hit the home run or get the game-winning RBI. He was there for you more so when you were lower than low. And he still made you feel like you were worth something. And that'll be, a lot of great statistic things, and I loved winning the conference championship, won both divisions when we were a senior. That was really really fun, really really cool. That was outstanding. But I'll always remember how he treated me when I didn't play well. There was no difference. In fact, he treated me better when I didn't play well. And so that's what I think I can maybe do for the kids that I coach, is not make it conditional. And I think that, man, that really, when someone does that for you, that's the human ideal, I know, to treat people unconditionally. But when someone does that routinely, it is powerful stuff. And I hope that I was able to do that. And then guess what? Kids don't feel as tight. Then they perform better. Then it snowballs in a positive way. And so that's one of the biggest lessons. A lot of great stuff with Gordie, but just how he treated you, even when you did something wrong, cost your team the game in theory, or made it. It was a double whammy for me, a throwing error late in the game, and then I came up, and it was within 15 minutes where I just had these two blunders, and he's never treated me better. It was just amazing that way. So I guess that's going to be his legacy with me, just how well he treated me, even when things were not going that well. And I guess his enthusiasm and all of those things, just they did really come to fruition when it mattered most.
Matt, you stated that beautifully, and thank you for sharing that. It's a sensational story. The same type of thing happened to me. I was on second, and I didn't run to third when there was a runner on first. I forgot there was a runner on first. Third baseman drops the ball, drops it, looks at me, tags third, and then forced out. A coach of an eight-year-old would have every right to be mad. As I ran by him, and I thought I was dead. I thought everybody in the dugout would shun me, or yell at me, and expletives. But he patted me on the back, just as he did you. And I've never, ever forgotten it. just as you said. Pats me on the back, goes like this to Joe Hugo, who was up. He says, come on, Joe, you can do it. You can do it. Come on, Joe. In other words, he sent a message. This is really deep. He sent a message to me. But I think most importantly, he sent the same message to the dugout. Namely, this kid, this dumb Coughlin, this idiot who was on second base, he deserves your ridicule. But that's not going to help us. Because the kid works out. He didn't want to make this error, this mental error, but he's working hard. So let's let him off this time. And as I went back into the dugout, every one of my teammates came up, bam, clapped me on the back. Said, okay, Ray, it's all right. It's all right. And honest to goodness, I was crying. I was holding back the tears saying, wow, these guys have my back. I just made the blunder of a lifetime. And yet, coach let me off the hook. And my teammates are saying it's okay. And just as you arrogantly said, that it helps the whole team. This is one of the ways in which he developed the team. I started out by saying, how does he do that? Everybody I talk to says, we have this great team. And we are such great friends to this day. I can call these guys up. I haven't talked to them in 10 years. I can call Bob Bachman. I can call Bob Calamari. I can call, hey, it's Ray Coughlin. Ray, how are you? Call Bob Gillespie, right? Ray, how's your jump hook? I mean, this is what Gordie has engendered in us. And that's, you put it beautifully. That's one of the ways he did it. He treated people the way they should be treated. And it was we should treat people the way we want to be treated. And that's exactly what he did. And it's very difficult. And it's in the 10 Commandments if you read them carefully. So you're right. So when you say by the way, chapter 10, you haven't gotten to it yet. But chapter 10 is pass it on. And that's what you're doing right now. You're telling me how you pass it on, how you're taking what Gordie taught you, and you're using those ideas to pass on to your athletes. So you're coaching softball now?
Softball and golf, and I'm kind of in a transition. So I work with all athletes right now, which is kind of cool because our district chose me to kind of work with all of these groups. So I'm kind of a little bit of strength training, and this is the first year of that, but then I get to kind of be a roving instructor, if you want to call it that, with different sports. And I've coached like Gordie, which anytime you can mention me in the same sentence, it's awesome. But I've coached girls about as much as I've coached the boys, and I've tried to do the same things where now there's a difference where someone's not paying attention, they're not committed to something. Okay, that's a little bit of a different situation. But if you know someone's trying their best and they make a mistake or they make 5 mistakes, that's when they need the arm around the shoulder. They need the kind word. They need the body language. Also, the body language, the tone of voice. With Gordie, there was no difference. It was truly unconditional. And so that's one thing for me that helped the most. So I try, no matter what happened, whether it's girls or boys or whatever situation, I try to be unconditional, and I try to think like the player, try to have true empathy for them. You know, how lousy they must feel right now. There's no one that feels worse than them. They're out there right now. So I try to really support them. And so I'm lucky that I'm trusted to kind of work with a bunch of different teams, whether it's in the weight room or on the field or at the driving range or whatever. And again, it's a unique position. It's not like a head coach of one or anything, but I feel very honored that I'm trusted to be able to work with those and try to sprinkle a little bit of Gordie Gillespie, like you said, you know, the enthusiasm. I mean, and really, and hopefully just again be a mirror, as you said before. Just to be a mirror would be something I'm hoping I'm able to do with as many of these young athletes as I can.
Well, congratulations on that new position, Matt. I mean, that is really something special to be chosen for that. That really seems like a tough job. So they're going after one of the best, and Gordie would be incredibly proud of you. Make sure you tell Joan that next time you're talking to her.
Okay.
She'll be proud of you also. And thank you so much for this. You truly are a disciple of Gordie, because you really are obviously taking in what he taught you and you're passing it on. Now you just told me your daughter is starting college. Is that right?
Yep, she left. She's playing golf at in Wisconsin lacrosse. So she left on Friday, and so she's got her qualifying rounds in this week, and then first tournament potentially next weekend. So it's a bunch of new changes, and so coaching your own kids too.
Oh
That's
yeah.
part of it. I tried to that's an art form in itself right there, and so I was lucky that they liked having me there too. They didn't, or at least they didn't raise too much objection to me because the coaches all wanted me, hey, we'll have your dad help and your dad can do this and that. And I always ask them to make sure. But yes, so we've got one that's a junior in high school this year and then one that just went off to play college golf.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, I tell you another thing that Gordie told me, because I coached girls softball. I have three daughters. I coached all three of them for 22 years. In fact, my youngest was a star and pitched in college. And during the summer, I found her an adult league, and she pitched in. And I would drive her to this practice. And there was a father and a son who were the coaches of this adult, and most of the women were in their 20s, late 20s, and there were just a couple of college players like Sarah on the team. And we went out for a beer afterwards, and I sat with the father and the son, and the father was a little bit older than I, and the son a little bit younger. And I told them, yeah, I coached for 21 straight years, and this is my last year. In fact, this is the end. And the two of them started laughing. They said, well, we were using tonight as the litmus test. Would you like to join our coaching staff? So I got 2 more years in. And so, but I remember Gordie saying to me, he says, Ray, you know how he would get like this. He'd get very, Ray, you've got to understand what you're doing for those girls when they're 12, 13, 14, 15. That's probably more important. You have more effect on them than I have on my college players. And I looked at him and he explained why. And even then, when I'm an old adult, he's trying to build up my confidence. And he never stopped doing that, of course. There's one story in the book you're going to love, though. When we were in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and I was with him, and he gave a talk, and a brilliant talk, obviously. And we had set up, we were selling the hitting vests, and I had published 2 of his books, the Gordie Gillespie baseball drill book and Gordie on baseball. So we're selling some books. And the father and the son came home, and all they wanted to do, I could tell, they didn't want to buy anything. They just wanted to say, Gord, that was wonderful. Thank you so much, Coach Gillespie. And the young man made a mistake. And he said, hey, Gordie says, what's your name? He says, Joey. He said, you play baseball, Joey? He said, yeah. Who's your dad? My dad's my coach. He said, now you're going to play, you're going to be a senior? Yeah. You're going to play in college? He goes, no. He says, why not? Well, why aren't you going to play in college, Joe? He said, well, I'm not good enough. I said, oh boy. Oh, this poor kid. This kid's dead. Sure enough, Gordie walked around the table and gave him one of his 5-minute speeches. Joey, I want this beer. What's you know what a gnat's ass is? You know how small a gnat is, Joey? That's a gnat's ass. Every single day of practice, you're going to hit a gnat's ass with that fastball. Then you're going to float it. The father and the son, man, they didn't walk out of that room. They floated. But Gordie, he would just look for opportunities to do that. And he would be so proud of you now, because what you're doing is you're passing on what he taught you.
Well, thank you, Ray. It means a lot, and I hope I'm being a mirror.
All right. And good luck with your daughters. And thank you so much. This has been a great pleasure to talk with you.
Pleasure's all mine, Ray. Thanks
All
a
right,
lot.
I'm going to call Joan and tell her I had a great meeting with you, okay?
All right, sounds good.
All
Take
right.
care.
Bye-bye.